This week's episode of This Is Only a Test is made possible with support from Storyblocks. Every creator should have a Storyblocks membership. They make it easy for you to bring all your stories to life without having to worry about time, budget, or resources. Because Storyblocks is an ever-growing library of over 1 million high-quality, royalty-free assets, including 4K footage, music images, Adobe Premiere and After Effects presets, things that you can use to really level up your video game. You could even use Storyblocks if you're a member of a large creative team or a marketing agency. And again, their assets are royalty free. Learn more and subscribe today at storyblocks.com/onlyattest. Again, that's storyblocks.com/onlyattest.
Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, February 4th, 2021, welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast this week. Podcast of indeterminate length because we have no idea how much time we have at this point. We're all busy, folks. Jeremy's got a full-time job. Kishore's out saving the world. I got a sleeping baby. Another baby on the way in 8 weeks now.
Unbelievable. It's like just yesterday you made that amazing announcement.
I'm still coasting off of front page Reddit, but I'll tell you, 100,000 upvotes doesn't go very far when you got a baby coming in 8 weeks now. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. We're gonna cut the banter short this week. We missed you last week. Will sat in very well, though. I hope you've had a chance at this point.
I wanted to ask what Will thought of the new intro music.
Oh, he was fine with it. I don't think there was no complaints. He didn't complain about the lack of dubstep. You know, if there was a dubstep version of our new intro music, Les Reverb, who created that. Hint, hint, if you're listening to the podcast.
Oh, God.
A dubstep version would be great for when Will comes back to guest. Jeremy, did you get a chance to watch In and of Itself?
You know, I wanted to every night, and I still haven't done it. I know. I smack myself, and I want to watch it, and I just haven't. I don't know what to tell you. I haven't watched it.
Wow.
You know what I have watched? I have been watching The Good Place.
Like, yeah, it's great.
It's
fantastic.
4 years behind on this, but wow.
So did you just reach the trolley problem? Like, are you like reading Immanuel Kant in the background? Like, where are you in The Good Place?
We're at 4 episodes into season 2. So
you've reached the big turn.
Yeah, past the big reveal. Love it. It's like I'm having a great time with it. Good show.
Ted Danson's clearly having the time of his life.
Yeah.
Everyone's super charming. I actually have not finished. We didn't watch the last season, but it feels like something to do. I believe it's on Netflix. Good Place, essential watching. In and of itself, highly essential viewing
on Hulu.
On Hulu, please watch it, Jeremy, and we will get back to you and get your thoughts on it in a future episode. Kishore, how are you doing?
Great.
World still needs saving?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. You gonna watch Super Bowl, the Superb Owl, this weekend?
Of course. This is the first time in a decade I'm not having a Super Bowl party. And I will be making wings by my lonesome at home, rooting against Tom Brady as all good Americans do, and then just enjoying the spectacle. I'm hoping for a good game, but I believe the Chiefs will blow them out, and I would take the Tom Brady with the first interception of the game, and I would take the under on the points.
How are Super Bowl squares happening in the age of lockdown and quarantine? The last Super Bowl happened right as COVID was picking up, the awareness of it. And if you listen to the episodes of the podcast that we were talking about back then, like we were still meeting in person almost up until early March. But yeah, I don't know what the viewing party is going to be like. The ad campaigns have certainly started. People are buying their spots around, networks for leading into teasing their big commercials. We'll probably talk about it next week. I'm excited to watch it for that reason. I mean, what else were we doing on Sunday? Nothing. I'm not going to brunch. Not going to picnics. Not seeing friends.
I had no idea it was Super Bowl this weekend. Are there people in the stands? How are they doing that?
They are letting a select number of people in the stands because the Super Bowl is in Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay is one of the teams in the Super Bowl. First time ever that's happened. And Florida allows limited number of people to come to outdoor events. So I think there's something like 8,000 people going, something like that.
And they're all frontline workers who have been vaccinated. That's an important part. The NFL invited 7,500 frontline workers, healthcare workers who have already been vaccinated, tickets to the Super Bowl. So
nice.
I think that's a great reason. I mean, they are saving the world right now, at least this country, because we need it. All right. Well, then let's jump right to our top story.
Top story this week.
I forgot to mention, because I was thinking about it a year ago, and I was like, sure, you had your Super Bowl party last year. I don't think I was there. I wasn't there because 1 year ago, when the Niners were in the Super Bowl, that's when I flew to Disney World. That's when I went to Rise of the Resistance. It's a 1 year anniversary. How the world has changed. I miss that. I was there for a week. We talk about that a lot in this household, how lucky, how fortunate we were to be able to do a Walt Disney World vacation right before lockdown happened. And yeah, another thing that once we get to see our travel and see each other in person, got to go back to.
My barista was wearing a Disneyland sweater, and I almost got weepy because I was like, I remember that. That's a good time.
Well, I think Disneyland is still parts. They've done some restructuring. Main Street is now part of a shopping area for downtown Disney. The parking lot is a big vaccination site. They're getting there. LA is still a scary place. And yeah, it'll be a process, as we say. The end is in sight, but we're still in the tunnel. All right. So the big story this week, it also has been over a year since the launch of Stadia. Remember that, guys? And the big news this week is that Google has shut down its internal Stadia game studios. They had set up a big game development, in-house game development studio to create brand new IP games, I think led by Jade Raymond, to create games taking advantage of their cloud computing infrastructure. Unique, like they would hint at all these like features, like what could you get away with if all the processing was done on their supercomputers, and everyone was just playing on a web browser or on an Android phone or on their TV without having a dedicated console. You could have these truly massive multiplayer games. You could have some really innovative AI, I believe they were talking about, but none of that's going to happen because a year after the launch of Stadia, they're shutting down those studios. Phil Harrison, who ran the department, put out a whole internal letter. I think Kotaku has the details of that. That they're basically, even though Stadia as a service is still operating today, it probably will not be a consumer-facing service. Maybe this time next year.
Well, they've shut down the internal studio, but they have not shut down Stadia. Let's be clear about that. They are still proceeding with partnerships with third parties to develop games that will run on Stadia.
And the partnerships angle, reading into it, I think the Verge had a analysis where if you look at how Phil Harrison wrote about the shutting down of these studios and the relationships with the partners, the consumer really wasn't, the gamer really wasn't mentioned. And it really feels like all the technology they've built may be to help a game publisher, like a partner like EA or THQ, develop a game streaming type service for their games so they can compete with a subscription service like the Xbox Games Pass or what PlayStation may have up its sleeve with their K.I.T.T purchase. Because game streaming, I think the timing just wasn't right. The messaging was obviously not great. Cyberpunk being a dud at launch, Cyberpunk being probably a game that really could have taken advantage of Stadia because of the high system requirements, but it having such a bad reception at launch didn't help. And they just, the exclusives they had really weren't that enticing.
What they set out to do could be considered a moonshot. It is like a trifecta of difficult tasks. They wanted to build hardware from scratch. They wanted to create a service from scratch, and they wanted to build their own games from scratch. Like that's any one of those. You roll the dice, you may or may not be successful.
And yet they wanted to run it as a company, a consumer-facing mainstream company.
Right. Yeah. And plus, you're making a service that is streaming games, which has never been proven yet to begin with on any large scale. And you're making that service for an audience that has lost everything to obsess about. And so now they're obsessing about, 1,000 hertz mice and 240 hertz monitors. And like they can see the difference between anti-aliasing 4x and 8x. Like these are people who care about the details. And it's a streaming gaming service, which is going to have inherent latency to it. And that was a serious problem from the beginning, and they never were able to solve that problem.
You're talking about the market they went for is core gamers, right?
Yeah.
Core gamers care about that stuff. They're the people who are willing to pay $60 a game. That seems like a misalignment between the type of gamer that this service would be maybe more appealing to. Someone who doesn't want to spend $500 or $600 on a console or $2,000 on a PC, but maybe just wants to play casual games.
To the difficulty of what they tried to do.
I don't think they necessarily went only after the hardcore gamer. So two things about this. Like, one, just because they didn't solve this problem doesn't mean that this is not potentially the future for consoles and gaming. And I think there's too many prognosticators that say the latency will never be able to be overcome, and that's the end of this so early. I wouldn't be so quick to shovel dirt on it. And two, this is Google. They start stuff and then they bury it. Like, this has been a history throughout the organization. So I'm also like, the surprise actually surprises me. Like we saw there wasn't consumer uptake, and Google is always very quick to bury project. Sorry, I will send you this message over Google Wave. Oh, no, wait, that's gone. Maybe I'll send you a message on Google Plus. No? Okay. I mean, how
about Project Loon? Project Loon, nope, success, but shuttered.
I don't read into that too much.
I don't disagree with you that it's the future potentially. It may be, and there's too many smart people involved with this project for it to be an impossibility. But I'm saying the difficulty factor was high, even for Google standards.
And Google has shifted in terms of how quickly they want to turn these experimental projects / moonshots into products. I think Google Glass was one of the first ones where, because it got so much awareness, the marketing people said, well, we have to productize it. We have to sell this to, the person who's going to spend $500 on a smartphone or $1,000 on a smartphone now. And people weren't willing to at that point because it was still early adopter, and it's tough for them to warrant hundreds of millions of dollars or however much into a division and not have a business roadmap where they can say by X date here they can have some return so that it can be not a hobby and a business. Apple does hobbies that become businesses, but like TV is still a hobby because it's not a pillar of their business, and they've been smart about that. It makes me think of how, Magic Leap, when they launched it, they were like aggressively putting this, what we knew to be an early adopter piece of hardware, into AT&T stores and really doing a big PR push, a marketing push to sell this as something as consumer ready when it clearly it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, Amazon, which also has a massive news this week with Jeff Bezos taking off, leaving his job as CEO. Very brave of him in this gig economy to find a new job.
Taking off is a strong term for, I think, a planned departure.
He's taking off into space, man. He's going to Blue Origin. It's going to move billions of people into off-Earth living. I mean, he can do whatever he wants, right? He's still executive chairman of the board or whatever. I think Andy Jassy is the name of the new CEO, and he just put out a letter because they have Amazon Luna. Remember, they have their own cloud gaming service, and they have game studios, but they are sticking in the games studio business and acknowledging that through an internal email that some businesses take many years to take off, and though they haven't had succeeded yet with Amazon Game Studios, they believe they will if they hang in there. So they're sticking with internal game studio development. Apple doesn't have internal game studios, but that's who knows when they move into the VR glasses world what those games will look like. But Google, not so much. So it's not quite RIP for Stadia, but I think the clock is ticking, and we're all kind of waiting for that to fail. There's some Stadia fans out there. The Stadia subreddit is still relatively active, but yeah. Sorry, bummer. The controller was nice. Good product design. Yeah, work nicely on those phones. Let's move on quickly then to, if I can queue up this. We're moving by real fast this time. All right, here we go. Pop culture.
All right, I wanted to lead with something. It's been mentioned in the comments on the YouTube video. Why don't we talk about The Expanse? And I just want to go on the record and say, commenter, you are 1,000% correct. This last season of The Expanse was the best season by far. It should be nominated for Emmys for acting performances alone. Last night's season finale had one of the most gripping sci-fi sequences I have ever seen on television or film, just in the kind of personal, creative way that it was told, compared to the book. It was just a remarkable feat, and it's a show both of you should be watching, but neither of you do, so that's why we don't talk about it.
I saw Veronica mention just what you said yesterday on Twitter. Veronica Belmont said, this is the best sci-fi I've seen in ages.
All right, bingeable. I mean, is there one more season left? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so I won't say too much of a spoiler, but if you've read the books, you know that after this season, there's kind of a natural sort of stopping point. And so while Amazon has canceled the show after next season, it actually makes sense in the arc of the storyline that's being followed. So I don't see it as much as a cancellation as sort of like actually pretty consistent with the source material.
If you had to compare it to one sci-fi series, which would it be?
Oh, goodness. There really isn't one. Like, it has some of the grittiness of Deep Space Nine, in the sense there's multiple cultures blending together, except this is just across the solar system. It is very much hard sci-fi, so it's evocative of The Martian at points. But honestly, it is a thing unto itself in terms of how they've depicted a future world that is imperfect in so many ways.
Sold.
All right, got it. That's one to binge. I mean, Amazon's doing really well with the original series. We have the Lord of the Rings series, of course, on the horizon. Super excited for that. But right now, week by week, we are on Disney Plus. We are got to do our WandaVision recap. Jeremy, you weren't here for last week's, but this is the week to jump in. So for folks out there, we're talking about episode 4 now. Of the 9-episode run, and it's one where they take a break from the format. I think, sure, you called it. You said that they wouldn't be doing what they were doing in terms of the parodies, of the riffs on classic American television every episode. I'm sure they will return to that, but you had what felt like real MCU. I mean, it felt like MCU live action content.
Get out that damn spoiler light.
Gosh, yeah, I know.
Get it out.
Okay,
get it out.
Let's do it. Spoilers aplenty. Whoa. How do we begin? Where do we begin?
I think we begin with where the episode began, which might be one of the best sequences in the MCU, where we see the aftermath of the snap, or the return. The blip, as it's called, and I thought how that was done, where we see Monica Rambeau's return to the world, and seeing the chaos that ensued, and depicted in such a very authentic way, I thought, connected to the story. I thought it was one of the better sequences we've seen in the MCU in years, film or TV.
There was money put in the screen. I talked about one of the effective ways they had filmed the WandaVision so far. A lot of indoor, this build sets, right? And everything looked like 50s, 60s, and 70s sitcom in studio, in a big soundstage. But this was on location. This was in the real world. It felt real, and you had these direct connections. I mean, the idea that it's not only Monica Rambeau, but now you know what happened to her mother, and that happens in like the first 3 minutes of the episode. That episode went by so quickly because they jumped from that immediately to what her job is, which is she is in Sword. Sword is a massive organization. So the details of Sword. Jeremy, I'm sure at this point, some questions about Sword as an org?
It's like a division of S.H.I.E.L.D., right?
It's an evolution of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah.
Right. So I love the parallels where you have, in the MCU, S.H.I.E.L.D. was created by Howard Stark as well as Peggy Carter to defend the world in a post Captain America in a basically in response to the Infinity Gems popping up around the world. Sword is a creation, I guess, after Infinity War. Sword is post Infinity War, like about extraterrestrial invasion, and it's proactive. It's they've announced that Nick Fury is going to be in a Sword themed TV show. One of the things, the little subtleties they said is that Maria Rambeau, as director of Sword, issued that after the snap, knew if lost Sword members came back, they were not to be given missions because it's an illusion that those could be scrolls. Right? Right. The fear is that, if you snapped away and you suddenly came back, there's suspicion because the subtext there is they're also aware of shapeshifting.
Okay, this is all very fascinating, but the episode I felt was such a payoff. Like I don't know. The Good Place kind of reminds me of it, like the payoff at the end of the first season. But I think even more so, like, because I enjoyed every episode of The Good Place, and I didn't enjoy the first 3 episodes of WandaVision, that this payoff was even better because it's like you had to eat your vegetables in order to get dessert. And the fact that you ate your vegetables meant you enjoyed that dessert so much more because you got it. You were in on the joke. You were in on the story that everyone else was suddenly, involved with as well and enjoying themselves. And I don't know if I've ever seen TV like that. Like I suddenly, my respect for this show skyrocketed.
It's a reason that I think the week by week format works because you have to have that delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Here, eat your vegetables first. For MCU fans, there are so many callbacks. Of course, you get Kat Dennings coming back. She was the intern who interned for Natalie Portman's Jane in the beginning of Thor because that was the only job posting she could find, and now she's a doctor in astrophysics. And then you had Jimmy Woo, Randall Park's character, who I completely forgot until like halfway the first view. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, first of all, Randall Park's in everything, right? He's in the DC universe. He's in Aquaman. He's in all sorts of character bits, but he was in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but as Jimmy Woo, the FBI agent. Did you guys watch Ant-Man and the Wasp? Jeremy, did you watch it?
Yeah, of course I did.
There you go.
Oh,
there
look
you
at
go.
that. I just made a
there
card
you go. I didn't catch that reference at all until I saw it pop online, where the magic trick is something that he casually pulled off. But what a charming character. Their rapport, really great. The way they set up that big facility outside that town felt epic in scope, very reminiscent of how they set up that tenant facility in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, when in Thor 1 as well. And
was
so
it this episode or the previous one where they kept changing the aspect ratio?
This one.
Both. They had both.
Because I freaking love that. That draws me in so much. I think that is a great touch, and it's right in line. It dovetails right in line with what they're doing thematically too, going through the decades.
Well, also the delivery mechanism, because you're watching it on a 16:9 TV,
right.
So it's like it's taking advantage of the literal format that you're watching it in, and it also it's unnerving because when that aspect ratio changes, like the letterboxing CinemaScope means things are getting real. right? It's in the real MCU world. The characterization of Scarlet Witch and the breaking down, like that replaying that scene where and immediately after when she kicks Monica Rambeau out of that zone and she looks at Vision, you had a real dark moment there. You know, like when she sees the Vision and she sees his lifeless state at the end of Infinity War, and then like has to rebuild the world, snap back into it. That was so haunting.
My son screeched and jumped across the couch at that moment.
It was pretty impressive. Underrated moment, Randall Park actually writing out the questions that we've been having for the last 4 episodes on the whiteboard. Why hexagons? Like all these like kind of theories that were up on the whiteboard. It was such a delight. They paid off a lot of questions that we had in the first few episodes. Like, why is this a TV show? Like, who is this like beekeeper guy? Like all of these like little storylines, but then left the larger question in place of what is Wanda's role in this, as we see her we're left feeling like she is the villain. She's the architect in some way of this false land, and that all of these people that lived in Westview are kind of pawns, with the exception of one person on that board who didn't have an ID as of yet. And they introduced some new questions that I think are appropriate questions going forward. Like one, who is Randall Park looking for in terms of the missing person at the beginning of the show? I don't think that's
under witness protection too, right?
Yeah, under witness protection. I think that's going to be an important person. I suspect it's a person we've met.
Who's your guess? I have no clue.
I think that one is Catherine Hahn is the missing person that he's looking for. And 2, never in the history of the MCU has a middle-aged white man been introduced that has just altruistic purposes. And so I think this director of S.W.O.R.D. we meet is a character we should question and interrogate in some way.
Interesting.
He has Alexander Pierce vibes to me. I feel like
Hydra
there's
vibes.
No accidental introductions of people here. So I think there's something happening there that is going to explain this. I certainly think we're meant to believe Wanda's the villain. I think she's the architect, but I think she's being influenced somehow.
Oh, really? No, this is love. She's distraught, and this is her fantasy, and she is basically has gone insane, and she is
coping mechanism, right?
Living in a fantasy world as a coping mechanism to losing her true love.
But it's the MCU, so there must be bigger things at stake. We also know that Scarlet Witch, Wanda's character, is going to be in the Doctor Strange movie. Elizabeth Olsen is in UK filming that right now, so this has to tee that up. And Elizabeth Olsen, one of the big teasers that she gave in an interview recently is that later on the season there will be a character appearance, I think she described it, on the same scale as Luke Skywalker.
That would have been my first guess, Luke Skywalker.
That's right, Sebastian Stan. It's gonna be Sebastian Stan, right? Who could that be? There are multiple theories. I don't think it's old Cap. I don't think it's Tony. Robert Downey Jr. wouldn't do TV shows. I mean, even as a favor to Kevin Feige, I think that would be a misuse of bringing him back as a moment. The question is,
I almost don't want to speculate too much because it could potentially spoil the direction they're going. There is one person I don't want them to bring. Absolutely not. It cannot be Stan Lee. I just that is my only request. That it's not.
We don't need CG Stan Lee. Yeah, I don't think no Chadwick Boseman, no Stan Lee. But who on the scale of Luke Skywalker at the end of Mando? You've done a pretty good job guessing offhand remarks, just like Han Solo in Rise of Skywalker before Kishore. So we won't force you to guess. All right. So fantastic episode. Back on board, Jeremy. What's after dessert? What's after veggies? You go in reverse order.
The 80s.
The 80s. Wow.
Bring it.
Main course.
The one I've been waiting for.
What's the show that they're gonna parody?
Knight Rider.
No way. We'll talk about Knight Rider later on in the podcast.
What do you mean, no way? What do you? What? No way.
Knight Rider was not a sitcom. This whole architecture is about sitcom. It has to be a half-hour show.
Oh my god!
It's got to be like Family Ties or Cheers.
I don't know. It's got to be a household one. I think Family Ties. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
I think that feels right. All right, moving on. The cast for the Sandman Netflix series has been announced. Now, it's a little confusing because there's a Sandman audiobook series on Audible that's also been very well received, an amazing voice cast. This is completely separate. This is the live action Sandman adaptation. Tom Sturridge plays Dream, and Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones plays Lucifer. So the entire lineup has been posted. I'm very, very excited for this. Neil Gaiman is highly involved, and Netflix could not be a better home for Sandman. Very excited. Did you ever read Sandman, Jeremy?
No, but it was my college roommate's favorite comic, and he was like more into comics than you guys.
Okay, so not for this episode, but in the future episode, Kishore and I will do one of our famous debriefs. Here's the synopsis. Here's what you need to know about the concept of Sandman and why it's a significant and important comic book and graphic novel, so that you have an interest in it.
Later, right?
Yeah, we'll see later.
We'll
another
get
episode.
we'll
do
get
it
some intro music for comic explaining with Norm and Kishore.
All right.
Love it. Golden Globe nominations were announced this morning as we're recording this. And one thing worth mentioning is The Mandalorian Season 2 got a nod, nominated for Best TV Show in the Drama Series. Now, while huge kudos to them, I don't think they're going to win, but that's a big deal. This is along the likes of, your Sopranos, your Breaking Bads, and your Game of Thrones, and this is a half-hour show in the drama category. You think it's worthy?
What else could it be nominated in? It's not a comedy and/or musical, as the Golden Globes likes to do. So I think that's appropriate. I'm excited for it. I don't think it would be my winner this year, as you kind of alluded to, but I think it deserves it. It was a gripping show that has flaws, for sure. The one that I'm pulling for is Ted Lasso.
Oh,
that's the best show, and the show that met the moment more so than any other show this year.
Speaking of the moment, there's also Hamilton nominated for Best Movie in the comedy/musical, obviously as a musical. And there's a little bit of controversy of that because they bill it as a movie. It's a filmed performance. It's directed and edited like a movie. Certainly Lin-Manuel and his collaborators treated the release of it as if it's a movie. But, it's going to be weird when they eventually make a actual filmed Hamilton performed movie, and then that gets nominated. This have to be Hamilton, the movie, film live performance nominated.
I just think it just has to win all the awards. So it's like it's kind of required that you nominate it because it's like up there and it's possible it could win something. It won the Pulitzer. It's got to win everything else.
It needs to be rebroadcast on television to win an Emmy.
How did it win a Pulitzer? Isn't that for like investigative journalism and books and
You mean
stuff?
a Peabody?
No, I won a Pulitzer, man. As I recall.
Really?
Yeah. The musical, not the broadcast.
The book won a Pulitzer. All right, that does it for our pop culture this week. Anything else you want to talk about in the pop culture world? I think we're good. All right, let's move on to technology news.
I'll tell you why. That was cool. It won for a distinguished play by an American author, preferably original, and its source and dealing with American life. $10,000.
It can be a play and a musical, stage performance,
2016
and
Pulitzer
a
Prize
movie.
winner in drama.
All right, I'll give you Avery Watch 2021. Still asleep. I can do more pod. Okay, you mentioned Knight Rider. More Knight Rider than ever this year because come next month, Tesla is rolling out the redesigned Model S and Model X, and the interior could not look more like K.I.T.T because they've gone full yoke. Have you seen the pictures?
Yeah, it's the same steering wheel as the new Roadster.
Yes, which I don't know what the legalities of the
That shape.
of not having that. Yeah, having a yoke shape, not having the full wheel for this type of car. But I think they're going to get it past all the regulations. In terms of user comfort, I think the wheel has its advantages in terms of turning, right? Manual turning, but this is clearly a car that they are positioning for maybe self-driving first or more automated functionality first, and the manual driving is more for just the casual, the sports driver, the Michael Knight who owns these cars.
I mean,
But
do you like the steering wheel because it does offer better viewing access to the dash instrument panel?
yeah, and the Model S retains the dash that's behind the steering wheel. They also revamped the center console, which previously was a portrait orientation. Now it's like the Model 3, the landscape orientation, inheriting that UI as well. I think this is one of those Apple, removing the USB ports, or Apple, removing SD card slot moves, right? It's the quote unquote brave move to move to go to push what their product design and to push the kind of future they want. They believe these cars can exist in forward, but in terms of actual usability, I mean, we're also talking about an $80,000 car, and so anyone who's spending that much money and upwards of $150,000 on a car is going to be happy, is going to convince himself with the cognitive dissonance that this is good for them. But I haven't driven it, so I don't know what. I haven't lived with the car without a full wheel before, with just that race car yoke style. So I can't say, but intuitively, I think it's got to be worse for big turns. You can't. There's no top and bottom part to grip. But the bigger deal is, I think, from a user interface perspective and a user experience perspective, is no stalks. The two stalks that you typically would have behind the steering wheel on the left and right side, for turn signals, for windshield wiper.
Those are gone?
Right? For changing your gear, usually. Those are gone.
Now, how's that legal?
Well, let me tell you, I don't know what legal, I don't know. All the functionality will be something you can tap on the screen.
Yeah.
But again, they believe that automation is going to solve this problem. With their neural learning, they think based on the cameras around the car and the awareness of where it is. So, for example, if you're parked in your driveway and it sees the garage door in front of you and you start your car, it's going to automatically assume that you want to be in reverse. If you're parking your car, it's going to assume that when you put your foot off, this is the next step past 1 foot, 1 pedal driving. This is 1 pedal turning and gear shifting. No manual gear shifting at the ready. You could also push the button you want on the touchscreen. But otherwise, trust the computer. Now, as someone who owns one of these cars where the camera is obscured when there is a heavy fog in the city, and you get the notification that you can't see anything around you, or sometimes when it takes 5 minutes for the car to fully boot up after you haven't driven it for a day, I don't know if I could trust this. I don't like this at all.
I just don't know how it's legal. Like, you have to have a hazard button. That's a rule.
Oh no, the hazard button's there.
Why
hazard button is different than the stock?
I don't doubt it, but I just assumed that stalks were also required for turn signals. Like, there's never been a car without them.
Joke's on you.
Yeah,
you're thinking about 20th century technology, 20th century way of driving. We're in well into the 21st century now.
Congrats! I now hate this. This reminds me of being in the chair in WALL-E where everything is catered to you and you just become fat and happy. This is starting to get too far.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing they don't have is fully rotating front seats. So now you're facing, limousine style, your rear passengers. They do have increased range and performance, of course, with the Model S's. So the $80,000 base price now comes with a standard 412 rated miles. That is comfortable drive from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And if you pay more, the highest end model at, I believe, $140,000 has a 500 mile. That's the plaid speed. That's direct Spaceball reference. Post ludicrous speed is plaid speed, 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. And also the center console has the processing power, enough flops to play Cyberpunk, because Elon has a vested interest in Cyberpunk. There you go.
Just so unnecessary.
Very unnecessary. Yeah, there's also a new screen behind for the passengers, for your kids.
That's
whatever.
A weird one. Like that seems like something that worked 10 years ago, but who needs it now? The kids in the back have screens of their own.
Well, maybe for music changing, right? I'm surprised.
Oh, you mean it's a car interface?
Yeah, interface
gotcha.
for radio and for but they could have also said just use your phone, use the Tesla app.
Unsurprisingly, they did change to the landscape screen for the front, so now that's consistent for all their cars. That makes sense to me. They just want to design one UI.
Yeah. In the video game world, Mass Effect, EA announced a big Mass Effect remaster. This is Mass Effect, Legacy Legendary Edition?
It's the compendium.
Called?
It's all 3 Mass Effects and all the DLC.
So $60 launches on May 14th. That's coming up relatively soon. It's not a complete revamp. There can be some tweaks in terms of load times. The elevators aren't going to be used for loading necessarily. So they've nerfed the elevators for the next gen consoles. 4K, all the new character models look fantastic. It's one of those things. It's a standard nostalgia play where they get the developers to recreate assets, and they have all the voice acting and all the scripting done already on the level design. So all they have to do is make it look like how your brain thinks the game looks like, because I'm sure if you booted up Mass Effect 1 or 2, it would not look that great now. I never played Mass Effect 3. I love the second one, played through the first and second one, but this might be a time to jump back in. You can also just play 3 if you want and create a save state. It was one of those games where the characters went from the first game to the very end, right? So your save game from Mass Effect 1 influenced how you started 2, and then the way you ended 2 influenced how 3. And as I recall, the end of 3 was not well received, but there are still fans of that franchise, and it's an easy way for EA to cash in on some bucks. Last bit of tech, iOS 4.5 has a notable feature. So one of the things that we talked about last year is, would they decrease the security requirements of their Face ID unlock because everyone's wearing masks now? And they didn't. They made it easy for you to quickly tap the screen and go to and reach the fail state, so you can tap in your key code to unlock your numerical code. But in iOS 14.5, they now have an ability that if you bought into the ecosystem and you have an Apple Watch, proximity between your Apple Watch and your phone will decrease Face ID's sensitivity so that it will unlock even if it doesn't see your mouth and it just recognizes your eyes.
I wonder how close it has to be, because I could imagine if you're within like that 30-foot Bluetooth range and someone gets your phone and puts a mask on and looks kind of like you, there's going to be people getting through this.
That's a very specific scenario.
Yes.
And probably an outlier. I mean, all of this ties into Face ID not being a true biometric security key. And what it is just like an unlock code. It is a deterrent, really, more than it is a true key.
Okay. Well, we will see when this comes out. We will see if there are reports of people violating the security and overriding them by hacking through it, by looking a little bit like the owner. We'll see. It'll be fun to test anyway.
Absolutely. Any other bits of tech that you guys want to call out? No? All right, let's move on. Moving on. Avery, still asleep. Here we go.
It's time for a moment of science.
All right, get ready for some Mars mania. Last June and July, 3 different missions were launched to Mars because it was in that window where we're closest to Mars for that transit. And time is up now. These missions are arriving all in the next week. So there are 3 launched by 3 separate countries. So United Arab Emirates launch one that's arriving on February 9th. This is called the Hope probe, or the Al-Amal. It's going to be a probe that remains in orbit. It has UV and IR spectrometers on it, and a high resolution camera that's going to be taking very detailed pictures of the Martian atmosphere. This was developed in conjunction with a number of NASA units and international units, because we've never really taken a very deep look at the Martian atmosphere to understand seasonal cycles there, which might also give us a hint to the past at how their climate on Mars has changed over time. And this is just a huge achievement for a country like the UAE, who has never sent something like this to Mars. So that'll be the first one. The next day, China's Tianwen-1 arrives. It will go through a maneuver where it goes through 4 separate close orbits. The first to just sort of get itself in orbit. The second is a recon orbit, will launch a sort of a probe off the side that'll help image the area that it's going to land a rover. And then finally, the last 2 are scientific orbits, where they'll be taking up close looks at the landing site and taking some measurements before landing a rover on Utopia Planitia, which is a 3,300 kilometer wide impact crater. They're going to be looking at soil composition. What's the really interesting scientific instrument aboard this rover is a ground-based radar system that can look about 100 meters below the ground. So I'm really interested in that. They're really looking for what almost every mission to Mars looks for, which is evidence of water ice in this impact crater. And the orbiter, really interesting, is going to be looking at the ionosphere of the Martian atmosphere. But also, it's setting up the infrastructure for a Mars sample return mission in the 2030s, so that we can actually collect samples and get it back here, so that we can use non-destructive methods to really analyze this. As a lot of NASA scientists and engineers will say, the most advanced systems to study Mars haven't been developed yet here on Earth. So getting samples back will advance our understanding faster than anything else. And then on February 18th, Perseverance makes its way to Jezero Crater. It is going through a version of 7 Minutes of Hell, if you remember that video from when Curiosity landed. It's going to hit the atmosphere at about 20,000 kilometers per hour. Then it's going to slow down through the atmosphere and then deploy a 21-meter wide parachute. And the parachute, because of the difference in the Martian atmosphere, essentially will go taut almost immediately based on how it's constructed, and begin to slow it down. About a kilometer and a half up from the ground, it'll fire its reverse engines to kind of slow its descent even further. And then it has cameras pointing down off the bottom of the rover that's essentially acting as almost computer vision, guiding it to the exact spot. So it's sort of like lining up an X marks the spots of where it's supposed to land in the crater. And just before it reaches ground, like literally like less than a meter, the sky crane will come out and lower, and it's a physical device that will lower the rover gently to the ground. It has so many things on it in terms of Perseverance. It's going to have color images of the Mars surface the first time. It also has microphones, so we'll actually hear Mars. Don't expect incredible soundscapes, but there is some wind on Mars. And of course, the Ingenuity drone, the helicopter drone, is going to be doing test flights off of Perseverance soon thereafter. It actually has to go pretty far away from Perseverance, a few hundred meters, so that it wouldn't kick up dust on Perseverance. But it'll go through a process of like test flights just up and down before it actually moves through. Perseverance has so many instruments. What's interesting about Jezero Crater is that from aerial photos, you can see evidence of former water there. It almost looks like a delta, like a river that sort of flowed into the crater. So they're looking again at water ice composition, but also some historical evidence of how water moved. It looks exactly like Curiosity, generally speaking. Like, I don't think you and I would be able to really tell the difference. But get ready for an amazing live stream where we're going to watch NASA engineers watch us land, minivan sized thing on Mars again. we won't get a live feed from there, but within a day or two, we'll get video. It's essentially reason I air quoted it is it's a series of still images that'll come back. That'll be essentially video, but it's really just a series of images. But within a day, we'll get images back from the rover if everything goes well. So an exciting couple weeks in terms of Mars. I've never thought we'd see 3 missions hit Mars at the same time. It's incredible. And that's just the beginning of what's happening for space this year. James Webb Telescope is finally launching this year. There's some really, really exciting missions lined up here soon. That's it.
Wow. And that video is of the landing specifically of the 7 minutes of terror.
Both. They have video at multiple points from that. I'm not. I assume they're going to release elements of that, but also just like images from the camera once it's on the ground, which is, I think, the first thing we'll see.
Oh, very, very cool. Awesome. Thanks for the Mars update. All right, let's move on to the last bit.
The VR Minute. Virtual reality this week.
4 things I want to talk about for the VR Minute this week. 1, big Oculus update for your Quest 2s now allow for the Oculus App Lab. This was the thing they announced way back at Facebook Connect, with developers allowed to submit applications without going for review, kind of like their version of SideQuest. SideQuest isn't going away. The ability to run apps, sideload apps, that's still there, thankfully. But now developers can upload their custom developed apps that are in this kind of hidden store and then share a URL, which you can just literally click the URL, much like you can click for Oculus TV content, and then it adds it to your library. And then you can download it via headset. So it's a very easy web-based way and very shareable way for developers to share apps that they are experimenting with that aren't ready for the marketplace just yet. It's a big move, very important move for the app ecosystem on the Quest side of things.
It's great. It's great. And in fact, SideQuest is now linking directly to the 10 games that are available in App Lab, directly from SideQuest. So there's no more developer mode required, hooking your Quest up to a USB cable. None of that. At least for the games that are on App Lab, it's great. It's great. It's like you said, it's a click and they will install. There's no way to search them within the store. You just have to find the links from blogs and podcasts and SideQuest. But it's great for developers who want to make their games more accessible.
It's one of those things that I love about SideQuest. You can see just based in the SideQuest community, how, like the variety of content and what things surface to the top. Things like Pavlov and the Doom 3 mods, and just like the saturation of users who use SideQuest who download those gives developers a ton of insight about how popular this stuff that people are because they can't search for it really, they are seeking out. And it would be a great test bed for content without the risk of putting something out, publishing it.
And you can sell things through Oculus this way. Like, that's an important point. These aren't all free apps. You can still put it up for a price on the Oculus store. Of course, you need the link to get to it, but you can still make money this way, which makes it much more accessible. It remains to be seen, like where the line is going to be drawn in terms of like emulators or stuff like the Doom 3 and all of Dr. Beef's stuff. Things that rely on you also sideloading data in order to work. We'll see if those things get through. Oculus has only publicly stated that these apps have to adhere to their guidelines in terms of like violence and pornography, and all that is still off the table. You can't have an app that does any of that. But you would think that like emulators or the Doom 3 mod, they would qualify. So we'll see. It's a big maybe right now for a lot of developers.
Yeah. Big surprise last week was a trailer drop for I Expect You to Die 2. This is one of our favorite launch titles for early VR from Shell Games, and they have been working on this in the secret. They have not announced the platforms, but we expect this to be on all the major platforms, including mobile platforms. They would be silly not to have this on the Quest 2. But if you haven't played the first one, it's a mid-century, tongue-in-cheek spy escape room, essentially, that's masked as a spy game, where in each level you are trying to get out of situations with timing and puzzle solving, and you can do it all seated, actually. So I don't know if the new game will all be seated as well, because now we have full room scale. I don't think they're going to go full room scale just for the widest compatibility, but the writing and the tone of the game was so perfect. I can't wait for this. That's coming out the spring, I believe.
Cool.
I got a shout out over email. One of you listeners out there pointed out there's a really cool Skyrim mod. Now, Skyrim for VR, which Bethesda put out, has been, since they put out VR support, it worked kind of well. We had some issues on the PlayStation PS4 version, but on the PC, because Skyrim is so moddable, Skyrim VR also heavily moddable, and now there's a mod called HIGS, HIGGS, which stands for Hand Interaction and Gravity Gloves for Skyrim VR, which basically turns every object into a physics object that you can use Half-Life Alyx style gravity gloves to easily pick up and manipulate. And apparently this has changed just how fun and easy and accessible Skyrim is. This might be the thing that gets me to boot up Skyrim, update all the graphics, install a bunch of mods, and try this out in VR. It's on Nexus Mods, so you have to sign up for an account to download it. I'll include a link in the description, but if you want to Google it, it's HIGS for Skyrim VR. And then last but not least, Magic Leap, still creating some news. This was at, I believe, a conference that they announced this at, but they put up a slide that says their second generation headset will come out. Early access begins at the end of this year, Q4 2021. 50% smaller, 20% lighter, and 100% larger field of view. I assume that means diagonally. That's a good thing. I mean, I know they were working on this after the launch of Magic Leap 1, before Roni left the company or left as CEO, and they had some restructuring and change direction for more B2B operations. But I'm really curious of what this next Magic Leap, whether they've solved the light field display for multiple degrees of focus.
Yeah, they're definitely on track for it. They made some cool stuff. I mean, that's a product that needs to incubate a long time through multiple generations, and I hope they can survive long enough to do that.
I mean, clock's ticking because Apple's coming out with something in the next 5 years, right? And as well as the car, and it's the early mover advantage seems, these high risk moonshots does not seem to pay off these days, because they're just it's a tough problem to solve. I think that's it for the podcast. We made it. Avery still is asleep. He's on his back. He's rubbing his sheets, sucking his thumb. I'm gonna go pick him up a little bit. We're gonna come back next week, talk about the commercials from the Super Bowl, and we'll be back
and
with
a report
more
on how many chicken wings I ate. The answer is too many.
So you're making the chicken wings just for yourself, Kishore?
And my wife and child. I'm being socially responsible.
I'm sad.
I will also say happy birthday to my wonderful wife. It's her birthday today. She does absolutely not listen to this podcast. She gets
it's my dad's birthday today too, and he also does not listen to this podcast. So they share the same birthday of February 3rd.
I think
it popped up my Google calendar.
I think they're both right in their choice. That's a good.
You guys out there are right. Thank you all for listening. We have an outro here from Great Job, as always. I'm going to run out of these ones he created back when we revamped the site. But you know what? We can always cycle through them again. Here we go. Again, haven't listened to this one, but I'm sure it's a goodie.
Hi there. I didn't see you. That's it.
Who wants to live on the? I want to live on the Millennium Falcon. Who really? It's not really that.
No, I'm okay with being uncomfortable.
Space Monk.
Millennium Falcon. Chewbacca can spoon me if I can sleep on the Millennium Falcon. I don't care.
Wow, $1,000 a night.
I don't know if I'd pay $1,000 a night to get Chewbacca to spoon me. He seems like he might be a little smelly.
It's gonna be expensive.
Oof.
That's Still pay $1,000 a night. One day. Spaceship Hyperion. All right, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Avery Cam out.